Alright, we are back. This is week 7. So, what we're going to be doing this week is taking a look at some do's and don'ts on evaluation, uh, give you some hints as to what you should be doing as far as creating criteria and how you should be structuring your evaluation arguments. And we're also going to take a look at a few examples of evaluations. Try to take a look at what other people are doing. Maybe you can try to evaluate what they're doing right, what you're doing wrong, how you feel about reading them. We're going to actually take a look at the evaluations in this lecture, so you can evaluate for yourself what they're doing. All right. So, what makes a good evaluation? There are some elements that will make or break evaluation essays. There's 3 things in specific that we're going to be looking at here. So first off, you would need some strong criteria. Okay, is it clear to the reader why your criteria is important in determining your subject quality? Are your criteria able to be met by your or any subject? Okay. Now, we talked about this briefly last week when we talked about setting criteria that is so high, such a high bar that it's almost impossible to clear it. Okay, we don't want to be doing that with these evaluations. You want to try to keep it realistic, especially because the evaluation format is also used for more than just evaluating non-human things. Okay, you may be evaluating employees at one point. Your criteria for evaluating those employees needs to be something that's realistic and achievable. Okay, so your criteria has to be strong enough that your audience understands how you're rating the evaluation subject, but at the same time, it also has to be criteria that is able to be met. Okay, you aren't expecting perfection; you're expecting good. Okay. There should be some acknowledgement of biases. Are you willing to accept that some things you judge as quality are based on your own personal biases? Can you move past those biases to create a fair evaluation? Okay, so what this comes down to is, are you able to be fair in terms of looking at what you're evaluating and giving it a fair shake as to what is quality? Are you willing to overlook anything that challenges your biases in order to meet that quality? Okay. Are you able to look past maybe some preconceived notions that you have about the subject and move into a point where you can evaluate them fairly? Okay. And you also have to have knowledge of the subject. Do you have enough information to make a measured evaluation of the subject? Have you done enough with the subject, watched, read, experienced it in a great enough quantity that you can anticipate all the elements that would contribute to an evaluation of it? Okay. So, as I mentioned last week with the requirements for the essay, it needs to be something that you have a good amount of experience with. For example, again, if you're going to evaluate like a movie, it has to be something that you've seen at least twice, so you know all the elements of it. If you're evaluating something like a television show, it has to be something you've spent a good amount of time watching, a decent number amount of episodes. Okay, if it's something like a travel destination, it's someplace that you have at least visited at least once or twice. Okay, so you have a lot of experience with it. Okay. That's why the Jackie Wingard evaluation works, is because she actually went out and experienced it. And she decided, you know what, this isn't the right thing for me. I'm expecting more historical perspective, and you're giving me fluff. Okay? So, you need to have enough experience that you can give a fair evaluation. If you are evaluating it based on hearsay, or you're evaluating it based on maybe a cursory look or a cursory glance or maybe a summary, something like that, that is something that you need to check yourself on. Okay, maybe you need a different subject. This happens more often than you think. There are a lot of people out there who will make judgments based on small snippets of what they think the evaluation subject is about. Okay? Good example of this is a lot of people out there who petition for books to be banned from libraries. They've only heard stuff about the book that makes them think it's bad. But at the same time, they're saying, oh my God, I'm clutching my pearls. Somebody think about the children. We have to get this book out of here. Okay? And they're doing it based on hearsay. Okay? They're not experiencing it themselves. They're not transcending their own biases. Their criteria, well, a lot of times with banned books, the criteria is if it doesn't have the words holy and Bible in the title, it has to be banned. Okay? That's where some people draw the line. But you need to have some experience with it. What this comes down to is you need to experience your subject. You need to know what's in it. Okay? You cannot make a fair evaluation if you are going on what Joe Blow down the street says about it. So let's do some idea generation and look at some examples. That's the main thing we're going to be doing today. Alright, so to help you come up with a subject for this evaluation, here's what I want you guys to do. We're going to have a brief journal exercise to start off today. In your journal, I want you to write about 3 or 4 potential subjects for your evaluation. Okay? Now, some people have been having trouble with this, especially with the classical argument. I had a lot of people ask me, what's my subject? What's my subject? You need to pick your own subjects. Okay, you cannot rely on me for that. In fact, I emphasize that I will not pick subjects for people. Okay, because what I'm into is not going to be necessarily what you're into, and if I give you a subject that you have no investment in, that's ultimately going to be to everyone's detriment. Okay, so you need to choose what your subject is. That's what this is going to do. In your journal, I want you to write about 3 or 4 potential subjects for your evaluation. These could be anything, ranging from films to television shows to books, or could be experiential subjects, hotels, parks, theme parks, anything like that. Okay? Something that you can evaluate. All right? Something that you have experienced and you can give a fair evaluation of. Okay? So, think about and write about the following for each chosen potential subject. Okay? So first, how often have you experienced the potential subject? How many times have you watched that movie, read that book, seen how many episodes of that TV show have you watched? Okay? How many times have you traveled? How many times have you used that hotel chain? How many times have you been to that park? So on and so forth. How much do you know about the potential subject? Have you experienced everything about it? Do you know information that is unique to that particular subject that will help in evaluating it? What are some memorable things about your potential subject? What's going to create interest in your audience in knowing what you think about that subject and what you think about what your evaluation is of that subject? Okay? Into what category would you place your potential subject? Now, this ties into creating criteria. What kind of things would you compare it against? Okay? So in terms of the film, if you're evaluating a film, what other types of films are in the same category as that film? So, for instance, just spitballing here, let's say you're evaluating a movie like, this last weekend my daughter was watching The Book of Life on Disney Plus, so we'll go with that one. Okay, Book of Life, an animated film. It's about Day of the Dead. Okay, it's a cultural exploration type of film. Okay, what can you compare that against? What other similar films are there that you can create criteria against that? Okay, well, the obvious one, actually, and the one that Disney Plus suggests to you after you finish watching it, is Coco, because it's another movie about Day of the Dead. Okay, you can look for other animated films that explore multicultural aspects. Okay, things in the Disney PN. You can look at Mulan. You can look at Princess and the Frog. You can look at Moana. Those are all different cultural than just the default white. Okay. You could just look at it in terms of animated films in general. You could look at it in terms of non-Disney animated films. Okay, you can look at it in terms of modern animated films. Okay, small studio animated films. Book of Life was produced by a animation house called Real FX. Fun fact: they're actually based out of Dallas. Okay, so there's all sorts of categories that you could find. Which is going to be the best category to define your subject against? What's going to be the best fit? Okay, and that's going to help you to determine what your criteria is going to be for that particular evaluation. So, once you've got that written down, read over your responses to the questions, then compose a list of criteria for the category of each potential subject to compare them against. Okay, so what kind of things would you expect to create a quality film based on the category that that film is in? Or quality television show, quality book, quality hotel, quality park experience. Okay, what kind of criteria are you going to use to compare these potential subjects against others in the same category? Okay, so I want you to take 30 minutes to do this. Write up something about your individual topics. Okay, 3 or 4 different topics. Answer all these questions, come up with some criteria. Okay, this is not one that has to be turned in on the discussion board. This one you can actually do just in your journal. In fact, I would encourage it. Okay, because this is actual idea generation. All right, so take about 30 minutes to do this, and then we'll come back. All right, and we're back. All right, so hopefully you guys have been able to put enough detail and a good number of subjects down in the journal. Okay, from this you should be able to choose a good subject for your evaluation. Okay, so here's the thing to want you to do. You're going to actually compare these against each other to determine which one you're going to write about. Okay, So look at the experience you've had with each subject. The more experience you have, the more prepared you are to evaluate it. Okay? It seems a little unfair, but that's the rule here. Okay? You need to have more experience with your subject in order to better evaluate it. Okay? So take a look at what you have experienced with each of those subjects. Try to determine which one of them is going to be the best option for you. Now look at the list of criteria for each subject. Okay? A more detailed, more in-depth list of criteria will make for a better evaluation, but not criteria so impossible that nothing could ever meet them. Again, we're looking for good, not perfect. Okay? It doesn't have to meet everything just to be considered quality. Okay? And you should have standards that are not going to be so enormously inflated that nothing could ever possibly reach them. Okay? So, look over the criteria. Make sure that they are attainable criteria. Then read over the experiences you've had with each subject. In your judgment, would they be interesting to an audience? Do you think that an audience would be interested in hearing what you have to say about it? Okay? And if so, who do you think your audience would be? Okay? What kind of people would you be aiming your evaluation toward? Okay? What kind of audience are you looking for? Right? So, look through these categories with all of your potential subjects. And that's going to help you to determine which one of those is going to be the best one to write about. Alright, so what we're going to do now is we're going to take a look at a few evaluation examples, okay? So that you can pick up on any elements that might be useful for your own. We're going to actually read through these, okay? These will be from both regular people and from prominent writers, okay? We're actually looking at a pretty decent mix of both. After each evaluation, what I want you to do is post your reaction and elements you felt were good or bad about each evaluation to this week's thread on the discussion board. Okay, for the lecture exercises. Okay, so we're going to take a look at. We're going to be looking at some film reviews. We're looking at a book review. We're looking at a television review. Okay, and we're actually looking at experiential review first. Okay, so let's take a look here. Alright, so the first one we're going to be looking at is a review of Six Flags Great Adventure. Okay, the Great Adventure is a Six Flags park in New Jersey. Okay, the site is Coaster Critic, which is a blog. Looks like it may not have been active in the last few years. Okay, because this is quite a few. This is from 2007, so we're talking like a 14-year-old review. Okay. Now, it is a blog posting done by a evaluator named Joel, who gives numerical scores to the overall atmosphere, the individual rides and attractions, and a rating called the Get Over Here Index. Okay? He will explain what the Get Over Here Index is. It's basically how much excitement he feels from each element that he evaluates. So let's take a look at his evaluation. Alright, so here is Coaster Critics' review of Six Flags Great Adventure by Joel. Okay? Okay, so it says, Flagship Six Flags Park is a story of extreme highs and lows. Okay? So it gives you the specifics on the park. Okay? It is Six Flags Great Adventure in Jackson, New Jersey. Okay? It gives you a link to tickets and pricing. And then tells the visit this is based on. The last visit is September 2006. Okay, let's go ahead and read through this. And again, it's a blog post, so it's going to be a little bit more inclined toward web style writing. Okay, he's going to have a lot of headings, but it should still be clear. All right. So, Six Flags Great Adventure, located in Jackson, New Jersey, is probably Six Flags' flagship park. While Magic Mountain has been downsized in the past few years, Great Adventure has flourished. With 7 new roller coasters in the past 8 years and the tallest and fastest roller coaster on the planet, obviously the company is investing a lot in Great Adventure, not to mention Philadelphia and New York City are just a few hours away. Point of contention for a lot of enthusiasts has been the park's frequent breakdowns on major attractions like King Ka and Batman and Robin. Notable rides and attractions. I can't recall any particularly notable rides or attractions. You will find a swinging inverter themed as a space shuttle along with a long list of flat rides and water rides. Theming and atmosphere. Great Adventure is located next to a lake in northern New Jersey. The park has been relatively clean in my experiences, and the theming was standard Six Flags fare. 2 new sections were recently added. The Golden Kingdom is home to King Ka and a White Tiger exhibit. The Plaza del Carnaval opened in 2006 with El Toro and some pretty authentic smelling Mexican food. Okay. Coaster breakdown. Trinity of kosher goodness with an uneven but large supporting cast. El Toro, Nitro, and King Ka are an amazing trio. Okay, we have some photos there. He's going to be a little bit honest here. There are some of these that he did not ride. Okay. So, for instance, Roadrunner Railway, Steel Kitty Coaster, Small Zamperla Kitty Coaster. He does not give this a rating because he did not ride it. Same with Blackbeard's Lost Treasure Train. It's a Steel Family Coaster. I've never ridden it, but it's identical to Beaverland Mine Ride at Geauga Lake, which I gave a 5 average. It's a fun family coaster. Batman and Robin the Chiller, Dueling Launch Shuttle Coaster. Unfortunately, the Dueling Launch Coaster has been shut down during both of my visits. Check out some pics here. Okay, I have tried that link and it's actually a dead link. I do apologize for that. Alright. Superman Ultimate Flight Steel Flying Coaster. Another ride that was down during my visit. I've ridden its clone at Six Flags Over Georgia. It's a short flying coaster that's fun but over before you know it. At least the pretzel loop makes it worth the wait. I gave its clone a 7.0. We have Rolling Thunder, a wooden racing coaster. He rates it 3.5. Rolling Thunder is a racing coaster, but you'd hardly know it. On both of my visits, the park was running trains on only one of tracks. Kind of defeats the purpose of a racing coaster, doesn't it? Great American Scream Machine, Steel Looping Coaster, rates at 4.0. An aging old steel looper that gives a shaky, rough ride. Check out my full review, including an on-ride video. Again, dead link. Skull Mountain, Steel Indoor Family Coaster, 5.5. Decent indoor ride that's pitch black in most spots. Runaway Mine Train, Steel Family Coaster, 6.0. Great mine train ride. Batman the Ride, Steel Inverted Coaster, 6.5. This is yet another clone of the popular Batman the Ride found at Six Flags parks all over the world. It's packed with a tight twisting layout. For me, some of the inversions are a bit too close together. I got off feeling like I'd just been tumble-dried, but it's still a good ride. Medusa, Steel Floorless Coaster, 8.0. Medusa was the first B&M floorless coaster. It features a smooth, loopy layout with open trains that have no floors and no walls. King Ka, Steel Strata Coaster, 8.0. The aforementioned tallest and fastest coaster in the world. It's more of a thrill ride than a full-fledged roller coaster, but it's quite a thrill indeed. Nitro, Steel Hypercoaster, 9.0. Nitro is an excellent hypercoaster that deserves the accolades and praise it receives. El Toro, prefabricated wooden coaster, 10.0. This wooden coaster is like no other. It's silky smooth and jam-packed with airtime. To see why I gave it a 10 out of 10 and ranked it third on my top 10 coasters, read my full El Toro review. Unfortunately, those are all dead links. Six Flags Great Adventure, QQM. This is quality, quantity, and mix. Okay? So quality, 6.7 out of 10. Quantity, 13. That's the number of roller coasters. Mix, strong. Okay? So there's a wide variety of types of coasters there. Get There Index, 4. A must-visit for anyone with a pulse. The numerous attractions coupled with that trinity of top-notch coasters results in a weak 4 out of 4. The pros do just enough to outweigh the mediocre coasters and subpar park operations. Normally, I wouldn't recommend a park with a track record of breakdowns and outages, but Kingda's launch, El Toro's airtime, and Nitro's overall fun ride can make an enthusiast overlook quite a bit. Okay, so that is his overall evaluation. Why don't you guys, I'm going to have you guys take about 10 minutes here to write up your evaluation of Joel's evaluation of Six Flags Great Adventure. When we come back, we'll move on to the next review. All right, and we're back. So the next evaluation we're taking a look at is a book review. It's a review of a book called The Contradictions by Sophie Yanow. Okay, this is from NPR. The evaluator in this case, the book reviewer, is Atelka Lahochi. Okay. It is a standard book review. So Lahochi reviews a graphic novel using the conventions of young adult and new adult literary fiction. Okay. So we're going to take a look at what she says about Sophie Yanow's book, and then we'll have you guys evaluate the evaluation. All right, so here we go. This is The Contradictions, Chronicles a Classic College Experience by Atelka Lahochi. Okay? Now, let's just make sure we're clear here. The reviewer is Atelka Lahochi. That is who you are evaluating. The author of the book is Sophie Yanow. That's who Lahochi is evaluating. Okay? Just to make sure we're clear on this when you guys go to do your reactions. Okay? So, here is Lahochi's review. When you were in college, did you ever study abroad? The numbers say you probably didn't. Only 1.7% of American undergrads studied overseas in 2017 to 18, and that probability decreases with your parents' income bracket. Even so, among the college-educated classes, the experience of traveling to another country for a semester has far more mythic resonance than the numbers can justify. That's because it's the perfect adventure at the perfect time for those lucky enough to afford it. With parents and administrators as invisible lifeguards, dipping into another culture is a great way to establish a sense of self in the sloshy foundering years of proto-adulthood. What with the building training wheels, though, a semester abroad isn't usually the stuff of a good memoir. You may have felt like Bowles or Burroughs as you navigated the alleyways and undercurrents of your host city, but there was never any real peril hanging on a false step, and your reader knows it. However much you discover about yourself and the world, it's almost impossible to convey the power of those insights to someone else. That hasn't kept a lot of writers from trying, though. Those who succeed usually have larger-than-life events to draw on, as Andy Warner did for Spring Rain, his terrific graphic novel about studying in Beirut. Sophie Yanow doesn't have high-stakes urban political battles or interpersonal blow-ups to talk about in The Contradictions, her award-winning comic about studying and traveling in Paris and Northern Europe. But since she knows that and is humbly conscious of the limits of her experience, she makes you smile and cringe and sympathize anyway. Yanow perfectly captures that early 20s state of mind where you want to have principles but don't exactly know exactly what yours are, so you're all too inclined to embrace those of anyone who seems intriguing or just cute. Right up front, she admits she picked her study abroad program in Paris because she was coming off a breakup and there wasn't a language requirement. Paris must be so exciting for an artist, says one of the random fellow students she meets at a beginning of semester mixer. But Sophie isn't particularly interested in getting an artistic education. It's life she wants to learn about. She sets her trajectory with an impulsive act of social assertiveness that we've already guessed is a bit unusual for her. Spotting someone riding past on a fixed-gear bicycle, she thinks, I heard there weren't any fixies in Paris yet. So fixie means bike geek. Wait, bike geek might mean punk. A breathless chase ensues, and at the end of it she meets Xena, the girl who becomes her companion for the rest of the book. There's no particular chemistry drawing Xena and Sophie together. A night of hanging out talking politics and veganism doesn't produce romantic sparks or even a strong sense of connection. But they're both into anarchism and eager for new experiences, so they decide to hitchhike around Europe together during their break. The journey that follows isn't suspenseful or surprising. It's not even particularly angsty as college stories go. And yet Yanow's got this particular combination of astuteness and humility that makes the very lack of drama engaging. It feels nice to sit with someone who looks at the world the way she does. After a while, you start noticing all sorts of nuances within each low-key anecdote, and you'll wonder how much you're overlooking as you charge through life at your usual pace. Yanow's approach to storytelling and life is manifested in her artwork to a truly uncanny degree. It's no surprise to learn that she's taught at several art and cartooning schools. She understands exactly what each of her choices is going to do. Her ligne claire, or clear line, drawings are so geometrical and spare they could almost be ideograms. She even uses familiar symbols to convey ideas sometimes. When someone's frustrated, the little spiral appears above their head, and when they're drunk, it's a cluster of bubbles. This combination of economy and universality is at once unassuming, wry, and subversive. On one level, Yanow is alluding to Sophie and Xena's simultaneous yearning and loathing for the option of living life according to a well-established instruction manual. She's also lulling the reader a little bit, so when she alters one of her repetitive little motifs, distorting familiar proportions or abandoning a visual rhythm she's established. It hits like a thunderclap. The apparent simplicity of her compositions is deceptive, and her message is paradoxical. Even as she strips away extraneous detail, she's teasing you about her own tendency to oversimplify everything. The Contradictions isn't just an engaging read, it's a warming and affirming one. Yano doesn't exalt what it is. At the end, a fairly standard issue American Wonder Yar, but she also doesn't dismiss its significance or mock her younger self. She knows that even if you're lucky enough to have the benefit of training wheels, growing up is always going to be a vertiginous ride. Right. So take another 10 minutes and write up your evaluation of this evaluation. Okay? How well do you think Lahoji did in terms of getting you to understand what she thought of the book? Were you able to tell what her criteria were? Were they clear enough for you? Just in general like that. Go ahead and take about 10 minutes and tell me what you think. All right, and we're back. So next one we're going to be doing is a television review. It's going to be a individual episode review. For in this case, it's going to be the Cartoon Network show Steven Universe. Okay, this review is published at the AV Club. The evaluator for this is a reviewer named Eric Thurm. It is a web television review from the AV Club segment called the TV Club. They usually do episode by episode reviews, and they also do them when they're released, so that the reviewer is giving his evaluation at the same time that the viewer is giving theirs. Okay, so in this case, Thurm reviews 2 pivotal episodes of Steven Universe by recapping the events that occur in the episodes and analyzing the quality of the shows against other episodes and similar programming. Each episode gets a letter grade. Okay, so you know what evaluation he's giving. Okay, this these are reviews of two extremely pivotal episodes from the fifth season of the show, and just out of sense of full disclosure here, I will say that I picked this because it's actually one of my favorite shows. In fact, I will show you on my headphones here. That I have the entire Diamond Authority on them. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at this review. All right, so this review is titled Steven Universe Casually Shatters Its Own Backstory with a Pair of Intense Internal Episodes. Okay? All right, so let's go into it. Now, he gives the two episodes a single letter grade B plus. Two episodes in this case. Titles are Can't Go Back and A Single Pale Rose. Right. Every run of Steven Universe Beach City episodes gets followed by some climactic events tearing open a part of our understanding of the broader Steven Universe mythos. Is this what you were expecting? Both of today's episodes move inexorably slowly toward decisive conclusions that set up major pieces of the season's endgame. And it's all put into motion by Ronaldo, who comes to get Steven in the middle of the night when he discovers the silent barn plopped down on the moon. In Can't Go Back, Steven discovers that Lapis has been hiding near the base, using an observation tool to watch the gems as they practice fighting in preparation for the probable diamond assault on the planet. He tries to convince her to come back to Earth and take a stand with the other gems, and to accept the fundamental constant of change in her life. A similar emotional journey to the ones taken by the other main characters on this show, only for Lapis's literal fight-or-flight instinct to win it out. Most of Can't Go Back is lovely and understated, particularly the visual style of Steven and Lapis' confrontation inside the observation field, which allows storyboard artists and writers Mickey Brewster and Jeff Liu to render Lapis as a silhouette moving through scenes of the ordinary in Beach City. It's an effective, punchy way of showing Lapis drifting through a simulacrum of the life she won't permit herself to have. I will say, though, that her shadowy presence accidentally highlights my major issue with the episode. I wish we'd gotten a little more out of Steven's interactions with Lapis, who I've always liked as a character, but who occasionally feels a shade less complex than the rest of the gems. I get that Lapis' entire character is based on her being withholding and unwilling to open up to anyone who isn't Steven, or in some cases Peridot. But we knew she was afraid of the diamonds, and we knew she was willing to, against her own emotional interests, sacrifice her relationships with the other gems in an effort to avoid being trapped again. Most of Can't Go Back plays out as a minor tragedy in which Lapis briefly warms to the idea of coming back to Earth as expressed in her first ever song, That Distant Shore, with lyrics by Jeff Liu and music by Ivy Sarashu and longtime Steven Universe musician Stemage. It's a sweet song that finds Lapis longing to be something other than what she is, using the observation orb to imagine herself as a bold, confident person who can put herself out there emotionally and prioritize her friendships over her own immediate safety. Basically, That Distant Shore is FOMO the song. Lapis uses her song and Jennifer Paz's singing, which I'm disappointed we haven't gotten on the show until now, to create a vision that's a little different from the emotional situations Steven Universe characters usually find themselves in, and a fitting one for a character who still hasn't managed to get past or find a way to cope with old trauma. Or, as Lapis puts it, I just can't let go of what happened to me. It feels inevitable that Lapis will show up during a climactic moment of confrontation toward the end of the season, so her abandonment of Steven still feels like an inevitable step on a path toward the more stable conclusion of her longer arc. Think Peridot stealing the diamond communication device from the moon base, but a little less funny and slightly less compelling. Then again, I'm a longtime Peridot fan. Still, that inevitability helps sell some of the lighter moments of the episode as easier to take, like Steven promising Lapis, I sleep with a teddy bear, no judgments, or his quieter, reflective attempt at imagining Lapis dropping the barn on the beach so Steven could go over to borrow sugar, even though Lapis doesn't know what sugar is. As often happens on this show, though, the relative levity goes out the window as soon as Steven has a vision of the diamonds. It doesn't help Lapis that the contents of Steven's vision, yellow and blue informing Pink Diamond that her presence is the only thing needed to keep the Earth colony on track, followed by the strong suggestion that Pearl was apparently the one who really shattered Pink Diamond, feels a lot more immediate than Lapis's anxiety. The biggest emotional stake for Lapis now, or at least my biggest emotional stake in Lapis, is her relationship with Peridot, who is still kind of sad and living in the bathroom. And without a confrontation between the two characters, it's harder for me to remain invested in what's going on with Lapis. I'm sure we'll get that moment eventually, but until then, I'm more excited by Steven setting up the next episode by firmly, decisively telling Lion, I need you to take me to Pearl. I can't exactly shatter myself. With those 5 words, Steven Universe confirms a long-standing fan theory, that Rose Quartz was in fact Pink Diamond, and opened the door for a whole bunch of new questions. Was there ever a real Rose Quartz, or did Pink Diamond start the rebellion herself in disguise? Does this mean Steven has standing as a member of the Diamond Authority? How did Rose hide her true identity from Garnet's future vision? I've never been the biggest theorist when it comes to the show's bigger picture. Generally speaking, I prefer to experience the show at the admittedly infrequent episodic rate. But this is definitely the most excited I've been about those questions in a while. Befitting this kind of fundamental shift in the way we think about the show, a single pale rose forces Steven to go on a wild, literally internal journey through Pearl's gem before we can confirm what actually happened all those years ago. After returning from the moon, Steven is on edge around Pearl, eventually confronting her head-on about who actually shattered Pink Diamond. Pearl clams up, as she usually does when faced with these kinds of questions, and sends Steven inside her gem to look for her cell phone, which she implies will contain the answers he's looking for. Pearl's mind is apparently made of several smaller semi-psychological pearls, representing different aspects of her psyche, and Steven has to interact with quite a few of them to get where he's going. Putting aside questions like, is this what all gems look like on the inside? Writers and storyboard artists Amber Craig and Hilary Florido do an excellent job depicting the bizarre interior of Pearl's mind, particularly in Steven's interaction with the Surface Pearl, who is in charge of keeping items cataloged and alphabetized so that Pearl can retrieve them at will. Beyond this, Pearl's excitement over organization, communicated in a perfect D.D. Magno-Hall line reading that contains both enthusiasm and the obvious papering over of bigger emotional problems that characterize the Pearl we've come to know and love. She also gives us a glimpse of quite a few phone numbers stored inside Pearl's gem, including ones sealed with lipstick or dotted with little hearts. Has Pearl secretly been exploring her sexuality with humans this whole time? Give me that episode! I suppose it's possible we wouldn't see those interactions from Steven's point of view. After all, as this Pearl puts it, I'm very good at compartmentalizing everything. While the big revelation from the end of this episode is the thing I'm sure people will be taking away from a single pale rose, I do want to highlight some more of those smaller touches. For example, the way Pearl uses her phone, which is hilarious. Not only does she have a literal briefcase instead of a smaller, more usable phone case, her primary use of the phone is to send Steven a text that reads, Dear Steven, hello, love Pearl. And when one of the inner Pearls uses the phone to text Steven, I want to tell you, but I can't, Craig and Florido managed to inject a shockingly effective use of the Speak No Evil monkey emoji to suggest that Pearl literally can't talk about what happened. As it turns out, once Steven progresses through the many internal Pearl gems, past Pearl's past anxiety over losing Rose, past the war with Homeworld, past even the surface explanation for what happened to Pink Diamond, he discovers the truth. Pearl, who I think we can safely say was created to serve Pink Diamond, shapeshifts into Rose while Rose returns to her original form as Pink Diamond, swallowing a fake collection of gem shards so she would appear to have been shattered after being struck with the sword, which, as we might recall, was designed to only poof gems, briefly destroying their physical form, but never the gem. That might also be an explanation for why Pearl doesn't shapeshift, something she claims she could do very early in the series but rarely, if ever, displays. So there was no murder after all. Pink Diamond, Rose, had to create the illusion that she'd been shattered in order to allow the rebellion to come to fruition free of the Earth of Diamond rule forever. Except that, of course, it doesn't seem like Rose or Pearl anticipated the devastating attack that wiped out most of the crystal gems. At the moment, it seems like Steven Universe is more interested in interrogating how everyone will respond to this information, rather than diving deeper into questions of how the Diamond Authority works and what actually happened to Pink. After all, based on her reaction at the very end of the episode, it seems like not even Garnet knew the truth. And like Garnet back in pool hopping, I'm pleased to say that I really have no clue what's going to happen next. Okay, so again, to take about 10 minutes and give your evaluation of this evaluation. Do you feel it was thorough enough? Do you feel like you have the gist of what's going on? Do you feel like you can tell what his criteria are? Okay, give it 10 minutes, and then we'll come back. All right, and we are back. So our next one is actually going to be two reviews that we're going to look at. I'm going to have you assess them both at once. Okay. So these are going to be reviews by a particular film reviewer by the name of Armand White. Okay. They both come from the National Review, which is a conservative-leaning political magazine. Okay. Which kind of seems weird that they would have a film reviewer, but it is what it is. Okay. So again, the evaluator's name is Armand White. They are traditional film reviews. Now, here's the thing about Armand White. You may have heard his name before, especially if you're a frequent moviegoer. Okay? White is known as the most contrarian reviewer at Rotten Tomatoes. He uses a 1 to 10 scale to rate movies and usually winds up rating against the grain of other reviewers on many wide-release films. Two of his reviews below are examples of his contrary nature. So before we take a look at the reviews, I wanted to show you, give you a sense of just exactly what kind of reviewer we're talking about here. All right, so here is Armand White's page at Rotten Tomatoes. These are the ones that they have included. Okay, so if you take a look, this gives you the general rating for each film that he's reviewed here. So the general tomato meter on this, 96%. So most of the reviewers felt that this was a good movie. This is, incidentally, this is recent release Judas and the Black Messiah. This just came out a few weeks ago. Okay. So most of the reviewers like this. They give it 96%. So there's 96% of the reviews for it are positive. He gave it a bad review. The general consensus: the audiences are left frustrated and susceptible to easy sedation. This superficial view of the past contributes to the national dismantling perpetuated by mainstream media. Okay. Let's just say that White has a problem keeping his politics out of his reviews. Okay. But if you take a look, we have a lot of all these movies here: Minari, Soul, Trial of Chicago 7, Sound of Metal, Promising Young Woman, Nomadland. They're all in the 90s as far as the critics' consensus goes. That's 98, 95, 90, 96, 91, 95. Every single one of them has a rotten review from White. Okay, so let's see. For Minari, patronizing reviewers misread Chung's informal style as eloquence or charm, but for alert movie watchers, this lack of effect feels unimaginative. For Soul, not since the Beat movement has Soul been so easily sold to all, meaning white hipsters. For the Trial of Chicago 7, whether dealing with bureaucrats or student zealots, the film has a perspective on social turmoil that falls short of the insightful panorama in the French AIDS activism epic BPM. Sorkin's right side of history saga is the bent history. Sound of Metal. Sound of Metal shows the millennium's avoidance of soulful self-examination. Merely a showy cinematic tattoo and narcissistic desecration of the body, Sound of Metal is a work of spiritual vacancy. Promising Young Woman. Dark comic nihilism like this has appealed to hipsters ever since Gus Van Sant's To Die For, but now it resembles regime change, confirming a major fault of the indie film movement that traded populist sentiment for elitist cynicism. Okay, so you can kind of get the gist here. I can give you a couple other examples. White was the only reviewer to give a negative review to, of all things, Toy Story 3. White was also the only reviewer to give a positive review to two particularly dismally reviewed comedies. One of them being Jack and Jill, which was the Adam Sandler movie where he plays a pair of twins, one male, one female. And the other one was Bucky Larson, Born to Be a Star, which was a really stupid comedy about a guy who finds out that his parents were porn stars and he was conceived during a porn shoot. Okay, he thought that was one of the most brilliant comedies ever made. So it gives you an idea that maybe Armand White's got all of his taste in his mouth. Okay, and even then that might be questionable. All right, so let's take a look at a couple of his reviews. All right, so the first one is going to be his review of Into the Spider-Verse. Okay, this was from 2018. This was the This was a Spider-Man animated film produced by Sony. It was made by the guys who did the Lego movie. This actually was the Academy Award winner that year for Best Animated Feature. It actually beat Disney. Okay. Actually, it beat Pixar. One of the movies that competed against and beat in that category was Incredibles 2. Uh, but this film has a 97% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. Okay, here is Armand White's review. He titled it "Into the Spider-Verse's Tangled Web." His short description: Marvel traps people of color and their supporters in political deceptions. The idea behind Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse is to make it the most comic book of comic book movies. The directors Bob Persichetti, Peter Ramsey, and Rodney Rothman take a surfeit of anime techniques, from comic book panels to cartoons to video game graphics, and detonate them in a barrage of non-stop sensory-assaulting visual flashes, accented with hip-hop music cues and self-reflexive nods to the Marvel Comics universe. The goal is to indoctrinate more viewers more deeply into the MCU commercial process. Whoever says Into the Spider-Verse is about fun doesn't understand movies or anything about how 21st century media operates, particularly the exhausting Marvel franchise. Millennials and others delude themselves by accepting market promotion as part of a larger cultural narrative. They are seduced into the Spider-Verse just like Miles Morales, voiced by Shameik Moore, the black teenager who is looking for a role model and who shares the same bitten by a radioactive spider transformational dilemma as the original Spider-Man Peter Parker. An alternative universe version is voiced by Jake Johnson. The movie first establishes Miles' Afro-Latino ethnic family and then shows the kid's socialization as an education lottery winner in a high-achieving, multiracial public school, a fashionable Brooklyn academy with a touch of Manhattan Stuyvesant. Essentially, it's an elite introduction into the fantastic world of Spidey, the legendary Marvel Comics vigilante, who challenges the principles of the boy's policeman's father. Assorted superheroes brought in from the MCU teach Miles and remind us of the different types of copyrighted cartoon diversity, a comic book approach to mired political identification. Marvel and Sony gamble on Miles to meet the identity politics fashion that now dominates contemporary culture. Consider that Spider-Man's example overwhelms Miles' school assignment, Dickens' Great Expectations. But this is not just free-willing, imaginative, and progressive capitalism as in Spielberg's Ready Player One. It's the worst social, artistic, ethnic, and political engineering. The Disney Corporation had flubbed an attempt at people of color suasion with its first black animated heroine in the lamentable and understandably unpopular The Princess and the Frog. Marvel and Sony are cagier here, starting with the Miles Morales concept that first came about as a response to Barack Obama's presidential candidacy, a normalization that turned into an MCU idealization. The Black Lives Matter notion that kids need to see themselves represented by people who look like me, rather than practice empathy or learn from vicarious experience, damages self-awareness and judgment and distorts individuality. It is indoctrination through race. Miles' boondocks hair and his black Boris Kodjoe-style father, sonorously voiced by Brian Tyree Henry, with his massive physique, jutting jaw, large lips, and tiny ears, use ethnicity as subtly manipulative traits. This catches the Obama electorate and its progeny like flies in Marvel's spiderweb. So many gaudy, multi-hued characters and onomatopoeia flash by on the screen during Into the Spider-Verse that a worn-out viewer might vow to never again use the political label people of color. Instead of referring to a visual artist's idiom, people of color is exposed as a synonym for minority, the term that British-Pakistani screenwriter Hanif Qureshi in his essay The Rainbow Sign decried as a common substitute for ethnic variation that actually insidiously determines someone's lack of political power. Think of people of color as a curse. Into the Spider-Verse employs people of color as just the latest digital bright shiny thing. Its stylistic potpourri copies the Teen Titan look and combines Peter Mac's psychedelia with the candied rainbow hues of Speed Racer. Sometimes the images ingeniously carry a chromatic bleed, evoking the misprinted old comic books. During climax number 97, featuring Dr. Ock's mob-like attempt at Aunt May's living room, viewers are simultaneously subjected to at least 6 different styles of animation. State-of-the-art animation disguises Into the Spider-Verse's political domination as pop cultural inclusion. The temerity of retelling a Spider-Man tale by pandering to the non-white demographic, and those who flatter themselves for condescending to it, reveals how brazen the media have become. The film's ultra-comic book effects resemble Edgar Wright's video game Extremis in Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, but I miss the humanity of that film and will not settle for animated substitutes. Alright, so that's the first one of the reviews we'll look at. This other one is now going to be an example of a film that he thought was bad, or a film that he thought was good that most other reviewers thought was bad. And it's also accompanied with another one where the majority of the reviewers felt it was good and White thought it was bad. Okay? So in this case, we have two films reviewed in the same review. One of them is Assassin's Creed, which the rest of Rotten Tomatoes, the critics' overall view was it was at 18%. And then you have Silence. Okay? Silence was a film that the rest of the reviewers gave 87%. So you can kind of guess how Armand White feels about both movies. Okay? So, the single review is titled Crises and Faith in Filmmaking. Silly Assassin's Creed gets religion more than the ponderous and punishing Silence does. Okay, let's take a look. Martin Scorsese's Silence almost offers a perfect allegory for godlessness in the age of Gawker and BuzzFeed. Set in the 17th century, the film depicts Japan's persecution of Christian missionaries and converts. It follows two young Portuguese Jesuits, Father Sebastião Rodrigues, Andrew Garfield, and Father Francisco Garupe, Adam Driver, on a search for their mentor, Father Ferreira, Liam Neeson, who is missing in Japan and rumored to have renounced his faith. The first images portray the crucifixion of several Japanese Christians as oceanside hot springs, hells. These multiple Gethsemanes seem to be surreal hallucinations revealing the cost of faith. They unmistakably evoke recent ISIS atrocities. It looks as if Scorsese is conveying a Catholic's nightmare of what can go wrong in a secular world. This opening is powerful but also disorienting, as the story moves further away from contemporary political parallels and into the esoteric history of Christians in 17th century Japan. The cool-tempered, drawn-out series of interrogations and torments is bewildering. Based on a novel by Shusaku Endo and a 1971 film by Masahiro Shinoda, Silence could easily have been titled Quest, but Scorsese's stress on the non-communication between man and God gives the title Silence a particularly disturbing meaning. The silence is symbolized in part by Father Ferreira's absence from his former students, which leads to an ironic plot twist. There is a sense of career isolation here, despite the usual hype about this film having been decades in gestation. How many passion projects can a Hollywood mogul like Scorsese claim? Silence reveals Scorsese's difficulty in maintaining faith and tradition in a world gone mad. The constant Catholic condition. Yet this personal and social dilemma gets drowned out by his ponderous religiosity and his movie brat distractions. Agony by agony, Silence imitates the classic films about religious intolerance and spiritual doubt. Father Rodrigues and Father Garupe hide in tall ferns from avenging warlords, evoking Sternberg's Anatahan. Their witnessing of enslavement reflects Mizoguchi's Sancho the Bailiff. They're surprised that the Japanese convert's devotion recalls Borzage's The Big Fisherman. Rodriguez's questioning by a devious old samurai, Issei Ogata, is a twist of Bresson's Diary of a Country Priest. A recurring Judas figure representing the abject mankind brings to mind Buñuel's Simon of the Desert. An icon of enduring faith references Bertolucci's The Last Emperor. Even Neeson appears, unfortunately, brings to mind Batman Begins. Yet none of these references ultimately increases our understanding of today's spiritual and cultural crisis. These scenes are inscrutable, as though a movie buff were citing a mixed-up catechism. After the genuine internal journey of Mean Streets, which looked at Roman Catholicism among urban American hooligans, Scorsese never again showed suffering. He hid his personal dilemma behind violent macho bravado. Raging Bull's religious overtones were portentous and irrelevant to the film's egotistical flourishes. This time, Scorsese tries an obscure religious perspective using a more composed, dignified, classical style, which makes this a religious movie without the fervor of either a penitent or a convert. There's one great shot in which Rodrigo Prieto's camera tilts up from a boat in churning seas to the sun in clouds, but even this is an image of confusion. This film about spirituality and faith suffers from the lack of both. Scorsese wallows in all manner of cruel attacks against faith, unlike Hacksaw Ridge and unlike Sancho the Bailiff. When he repeatedly subjects Father Rodrigues and the audience to the blasphemy of stepping on a Christ icon, it feels like self-flagellation, at odds with the effort to define contemporary Hollywood nihilism. Father Rodrigues respects Japan's hidden Christians for believing the promise that their suffering would not end in nothingness but in salvation. Yet Scorsese shows that faith in words only. Instead, one landscape nearly reproduces the sinister cover of Led Zeppelin's Houses of the Holy album. Perhaps Scorsese had never heard Morrissey's I Have Forgiven Jesus. Silence takes a juvenile approach to what Ingmar Bergman already explored in his 60s Silence of God trilogy, Through a Glass Darkly, Winter Light, and The Silence. Those films, famous at one time on the long-gone art movie circuit, depicted the spiritual agony of Christians in the modern secular world. But Scorsese, belonging to the draft-dodging generation of movie brat auteurs, Coppola, Spielberg, De Palma, seems to have lost touch with the cultural basis of Bergman's spiritual questioning, as well as Fellini's, Rossellini's, and the subversive Buñuel's. Just as the increasingly faithless movie brats have taken simplistic anti-West progressive stances on political history and gone silent on the contemporary persecution of Christians, Silence shows little real interest in the ISIS and Taliban allegory it initially presents. Silence becomes a weirdly punishing chronicle of the tests that Christians endure to hold on to their faith in the face of assaults from enemies. Scorsese naively and sentimentally equates this troubling history and its all-too-modern counterpart in the Middle East and elsewhere with the crisis of the heart. Did anybody go to see Assassin's Creed, the perfectly disreputable antidote to silence? With less gravitas than Scorsese, director Justin Kurzel adapts the eponymous violent video game and gets right to the point of religious and moral conflict in this postmodern medieval gothic sci-fi flick about the descendant of a heretic from the Spanish Inquisition and the social scientist who experiments with eradicating mankind's violent instincts. Kurzel made the surprisingly effective Macbeth with Michael Fassbinder and Marion Cotillard, and reteams them here. Fassbinder is Cal Lynch, heir of the heretic Aguilar, and Cotillard is Sophia, humanitarian daughter of a fascist tycoon. Going from the 12th century to the 21st century, Kurzel does variations on themes from Macbeth, and lots of this grab-bag nonsense is as provocative as it is silly. There's the usual video game confusion about history and ethics, giving the Nietzschean quote, "Nothing is true, everything is permitted," more emphasis than any scriptural quote. But this video game nihilism also offers an Orwellian cautionary tale. A Clockwork Orange morphs into Minority Report and Ghost Rider with a constantly moving camera, cross-cut parkour fighting, furious action, and a relentless exercise in montage. The crucifixion postures and Christian allegories flying around in Assassin's Creed at least show genuine filmmaking intelligence. Plus a franchise-ready, impressively physical performance by Fassbinder that almost worthy of Zack Snyder. Inept Ron Howard made it easy to hate the abuse of religious faith in the Da Vinci Code, but Kurzel shows super terrific skill without Scorsese's self-importance. Alright, so let's take 10 minutes and have you guys give me what you think about Armand White and his ideas about these three particular films. Alright, and that's going to do it for this week. So for this week, I want you guys to continue to work on what you've been working on before with MindTap, with the discussion boards, with the lecture exercises this week. I do want you guys to take a look at the journal exercise we did earlier in this lecture, and from there I want you to pick a topic, pick a subject for your evaluation. Okay, I want you guys to get started writing this because next week you guys need to start workshopping them. Okay, we are a bit of a time crunch. However, there will be an extra week on this because of spring break. Okay, so with that being said, have this week work on trying to find your evaluation topic, work on MindTap, work on the discussion boards, work on the lecture exercises. All that being said, I will see you guys next week. Thank you for watching.